All right, hello everyone. This is going to be a presentation on the information for this unit this week. You should have already gone through some of it, but this will be a little bit of a review of things we've talked about in past units that are relevant, and then some new information for your activities this week. So we're going to go over quickly the levels of government, what is federalism, what are the types of powers, some examples of some of the specific powers, the sources that we find all of this information in, and then how to amend the constitutions or anything else, any of the other sources. So first of all, we have 3 levels of government in the United States. We have the federal or national government. That's our highest level. They make laws for the whole United States. State governments, they make laws just specific to their state, so a smaller group of people. And then local governments make laws specific for even smaller groups of people, so their towns, their village, or their city. So federalism is the idea that power is divided and shared between the federal government and the states. This was a hot debate when our Constitution was being written by our founding fathers, and they settled on the idea of federalism, so dividing and sharing power between both the federal government and the states. They were trying to make it as fair as they possibly could. Okay, the types of powers that we have. There are 3 different types of powers, starting with enumerated powers. So these are powers belonging only to the federal government. They are listed in the United States Constitution. So enumerated basically means that they are explicit. They are listed out in the Constitution, and that means they are powers belonging only to the federal government. Second, we have reserved powers. These are powers belonging only to the state government. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, so that's part of the Bill of Rights, says that any power not listed in the Constitution goes to the states. This was our founding fathers' way of making sure that if it wasn't listed out, it would go to the states. Those are reserved powers. Lastly, we have concurrent powers. So this means that it's powers shared between the federal and state governments, powers that they both have. So enumerated, reserved, and concurrent. Now we'll look at some specific examples. So this chart here, we'll start on the left with enumerated powers. So these are powers at the national level that typically relate to issues that affect the entire country. So an enumerated power, those specific examples included in here, they affect every single person in the country, not just a specific area. That is why the federal government deals with them. So we've got coin and print money, regulate interstate commerce, that's trade, declare war, manage relations with foreign countries, punish counterfeiters of U.S. securities and money, raise, maintain, and command U.S. military forces, establish systems of patents and copyrights, establish standard weights and measures, make naturalization rules for immigrants to become citizens, and establish post offices. Those are the enumerated federal government powers. On the right side, we have reserved powers. So these are powers at the state or local level typically, and they relate to issues that affect a smaller group of people. So reserved power examples, we have that they regulate elections, regulate a state's internal commerce, establish local governments, establish and maintain state militia, that's a state military, provide for the health, safety, and education of residents, ratify amendments to the Constitution, regulate the practice of law and medicine, and keep all powers not granted to the federal government by the 10th Amendment. So those are some examples of reserved powers. Another good example could be issuing driver's licenses, because when the Constitution was written, cars did not exist. So when automobiles were invented, that is a power that went to the states since it wasn't listed in the Constitution. Lastly, concurrent powers. So these are powers that both the federal and state levels of government have. So they both have the power to tax, to borrow money, provide for the general welfare, legislate and enforce laws, and create and maintain court systems or courts. So these are just some of the examples of enumerated, concurrent, and reserved powers. Now, the sources of these. For the federal government, the source is the United States Constitution. We've gone over that many times. However, we have not talked about the Florida Constitution yet. So the state of Florida actually has its own constitution. It looks pretty similar. Some of the things, we're going to see some of the ideas that were taken from the U.S. Constitution, but either way, the state of Florida, we have a constitution, and that is the source of our laws and our structure of government in our state. So the similarities and differences. On this chart, we have the U.S. Constitution on the left and the Florida Constitution on the right. Just going to briefly go over this. So on the left, if we have any green arrows between, that means it's pointing to something that is similar, and then the red arrows are pointing to differences. So both the U.S. Constitution and the Florida Constitution begin with "we the people." That's because both are showing that their government gets their power from the citizens. That's an extremely important idea, and the Florida Constitution wanted to copy that from the U.S. Constitution. Next, we have some differences. So these all deal with the size or the length of the Constitution. So the U.S. Constitution is actually shorter than the Florida Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is only 7 articles. The Florida Constitution is 12 articles. The U.S. Constitution is only 1 big page, and the Florida Constitution currently is 80 pages. So similarities, they both have something similar to a Bill of Rights. So we know the Bill of Rights for the U.S. Constitution includes a list of rights for the people. The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution are the Bill of Rights. The Florida Constitution contains something similar, a Florida Declaration of Rights, where it lists out the rights of the people. So that's a big similarity between the two. Next, both of them are written as a living document. That means it should be interpreted and changed over time. Now, the U.S. Constitution only has 27 amendments, but the Florida Constitution has over 100 amendments. And so that is they're kind of the same, but also different, meaning that they can both be changed, but one is easier to change, and that's the Florida Constitution. The last point for the U.S. Constitution is that it contains a supremacy clause stating that the United States is the highest law of the land. That means nothing can go against the U.S. Constitution. The last two differences on the Florida Constitution, the Florida Constitution addresses public education, motor vehicles, and elections, and it also deals with day-to-day issues that affect state residents. These two things we're going to point out next, because this was talking about that they can be amended, and now we're going to talk about how they both can be amended. So the U.S. Constitution only has 27 amendments. Amendments must be proposed by 2/3 of Congress, and it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. It is really hard to amend the U.S. Constitution because to hit the 2/3 of Congress and the 3/4 of state legislatures, that's a lot of people agreeing, and it's really hard for us to find enough people to agree on an amendment nowadays. The Florida Constitution, like I mentioned before, is a lot easier to amend. It's been amended over 100 times. That's because there's several different ways, 5 exactly, to propose amendments. There's only one way to propose an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. There are 5 ways to propose it to the Florida Constitution. So 3/5 of both Florida houses can propose an amendment. The Constitutional Convention can propose an amendment. A voter initiative, meaning a citizen of Florida could get enough signatures on a petition and a voter initiative can make it to the ballot. The Constitutional Revision Commission, so this is a group of people who get together every 20 years or so to review the Florida Constitution and come up with any changes they think needs to be made. And then the Taxation and Budget Reform Commission. Those are the 5 ways an amendment can be proposed. However, all changes have to be approved by voters or the Constitutional Revision Commission, which it really is just the voters because even the Constitutional Revision Commission has to get the approval of voters. So that's a little bit about how to amend or change both constitutions at the federal and the Florida level. Lastly, I want to just show you quickly a little bit of Bradenton's Code of Ordinances. So at the local level, most local governments, cities or counties like Bradenton or Manatee County, have ordinances and laws that are specific to just that area. These rules and laws are typically located in a code of ordinances or a charter. So Bradenton, for example, was founded by a charter, and then we also have a code of ordinances. So this picture on the right shows a little bit of our code of ordinances. It's not the complete thing, but it's available online. You're able to go look and see the specific code of ordinances for our city. So it lists all the laws that we have to abide by, and this can be changed by the city council, and we also have local elections that decide some of these ordinances every once in a while. So that's the basic information you need to know for this unit. You're more than welcome to go back and rewatch this or pause and watch different parts over so that you make sure you understand it. But if you need any information for this week's unit, then hopefully you got it from here. All right, thanks for watching, guys.